This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Forging Table. The mission of Undaunted.Life is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. At the Forging Table, you'll see a group of regular guys forging spiritual resilience by digging into God's Word, and we're welcoming all of you to come along on that journey with us. That's Jake, that's Eric, that's Ryan. Guys, I've been feeling the pressure of this, okay? We are going, it's appropriate you're wearing an Origin shirt today, Jake, because we are getting back to the origins. And we've been in a little group text for the last couple of weeks because, as you guys know, peek behind the curtain, we record these in batches. And so we're recording 4 at a time. And sometimes there are passages of scripture where it's like, crap, how are we going to turn this into an hour's worth of content? And then other times it's like, oh my gosh, there's just no way. And it's like, we're somehow going to have to record the first, 4 chapters of Genesis like an hour at a time. And I forget who said it, but it's like we could spend 4 hours just on Genesis 1, and that's not just like debating old earth, young earth. And so I guess I'm wondering how y'all feel. Am I like the only one that's like feeling a little bit nervous? I don't know that I've ever been nervous since the first one we recorded.
I'm nervous. I studied for like 3 hours yesterday.
Yeah, you were getting after it.
Yeah, I was like, I don't want to screw this up.
When you were studying, what were you doing? Like what specifically? Because I know you. So one thing I know Ryan loves to do, which is like very inspirational for me, is you just you'll read the text, and then you'll just go back and you'll just read because you're reading the 4 chapters or whatever we're covering, and then you'll just go back and reread it, and you'll do that for weeks before you get in here. But for that 3 hours, what ish were you doing?
I went back and reread, looked over notes. While I was looking over the notes, these are notes that I put in there before I go and read any type of commentaries. I usually like to read commentaries to check myself to make sure I'm not
wrecking yourself.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I don't go into the Andy Stanley commentaries, but
he has his own commentary. That'd be amazing.
He does. I was being sarcastic because we were talking about heretics.
His own volumes.
But no, I mean, I go through my notes again, reread. I probably reread it another 2 times. And then I go and look at the commentaries. And so this one I kind of went through a lot of Moody, went through a lot of Boyce. I actually went through Calvin too on the first chapter.
Shock.
So yeah, shocker of all shocks. But yeah, I mean, did that for about 3 hours yesterday while listening to some Shane and Shane.
Okay, very good. That's
fun.
Good. So what about you guys? How are you feeling about getting into Genesis? You're shaking your head, Jake.
I took off yesterday. I took off work yesterday.
Okay, all right.
Which with the time of year it is and everything, that's probably not the most convenient to do, but I literally took off all day yesterday just so I could keep, and like Ryan, I think I read through the 4 chapters, I don't know, probably a dozen times, but then had the Logos software and had it on the 3 screens, and here's this commentary, here's this commentary, here's this commentary, here's this commentary. And
by the way, guys, if you want to have, so no one knows how to pronounce it. Is it Logos? Is it Logos? No one actually knows. But we are able to get that at a discount. And guys, I get questions all the time in my DMs and my emails. How do I get access to that? Ryan, where is the link?
In the show notes.
It is in the show notes. So guys, if you go to the show notes for this episode, guys, the show notes, the link, guess where the link is? It's in the show notes. If you go to the show notes, there is a link to where you can get the Logos Bible software at a discount. And so by the time you guys are listening to this, they have a little bit of a different, structure, because used to you had to pay for the software, and they're moving to more like a monthly charge model. But there's no more powerful Bible software in existence. And that's not my opinion. It just doesn't exist. And so that's what you were digging into just to get ready.
Yesterday, I literally bought the Moody commentary on Logos yesterday.
Right. That's another thing. So if you like Moody or MacArthur or Calvin or any of those types of things, some of them will come with your package, but some of them you can just buy the commentary right there inside of the software. And then inside of the software, you can still do all the stuff where you highlight words and do a word study.
I'm going to fix you on that. You can't buy it in the app. You have to go to the website.
Oh, you go to logos.com, you go and you get into your profile?
Because I was looking for Boyce, and I got the books on Amazon. I was like, man, it'd be so much easier if I had these commentaries in here. And I'm like, I went over and looked for them, and I was like, man, I can't. It says not for sale in the app, not for sale in the app. And so I'm like, man,
Amazon does the same thing. It's annoying.
Well, I found out it's because Apple will charge them 40% of the book price. And so what you do is just go to logos.com, log in, and then go to their store, and all the commentaries are there. I got the Moody commentary, the Boyce commentaries there. The Boyce one, I'll buy the 2nd and 3rd volume as we go along, because by the time I get back into it, I don't need the first volume.
Okay, so, fair enough.
It's pretty cool.
Browning, how are you feeling about all this?
Feeling great. Yeah, I reread, and then I start looking at themes, look at the big theological questions. I ask questions, then I try to get those questions answered.
Yeah, you've always, because I remember years ago when you were sitting down and we were kind of talking about how to approach the Bible, and that's a very interesting way of doing it. And so same thing for me. I mean, this morning I was literally just kind of stretching out and getting I was listening to a King James reading of it. And I was listening to it slowly and just trying to go through every word because I normally read in the ESV. But guys, I don't want to belabor it any further. We just need to go ahead and get into Genesis 1. And as most of you in the audience are familiar with up to this point, we typically will read a section, talk about it, read another section, talk about it, do all that. And that is going to remain the cadence basically for the Forging Table as we go. But with Genesis 1, I thought it would be appropriate just to read it all the way through, just to read it from beginning to end. Then we'll go back and, we have a myriad of things that we can discuss coming off of Genesis 1, and we're going to get into that. And so, Jake, how about you go ahead and read the entirety of Genesis 1, and just to make sure, what version are you reading through the ESV?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so everybody listening at home, he will be reading in the English Standard Version. So let's all buckle up. Genesis 1, let's go to the beginning.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, which is their seed, each according to its kind, on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God said that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day.
Very nicely done. So guys, getting into this first part of Genesis, it's kind of become like a little bit of a meme joke on my show because I'm very vehement about the fact that we are not going to have a young earth, old earth debate on my show because people have told me all the time, like, Kyle, you should have this guy on. He's a young earth advocate. I want you to talk to him. I'm like, nah, not interested. And then they'll have like, hey, this is a guy, he's an old earth guy, but he's Christian. So you should have him on. I'm like, nah, I'm just not that interested. And the reason that I personally have not been that interested in it is because I hope that everyone on this debate can agree that we can't know for certain, that we can't prove it. Like we can't technically prove that we're having this conversation right now, that we are not in a simulation and all this type of stuff. It can't be proven how the earth started because we have no tools by which to test that theory, no scientific method because nobody was there. We didn't see it. And so if you can come into it with that, then I'm interested in the conversation because in doing the study of Genesis 1, you just run up against young earth, old earth. Like you just can't escape it. And so I feel like that's kind of the first thing that we should talk about. So just in general, without any like commentary, I want to kind of know where everyone at the table is because I think I have a guess, but just if you had to put your flag down and firmly on one side or even like softly on one side, young earth, older, Jake.
Young earth.
Young earth.
Young earth.
Young earth. Ryan?
I hate this question.
You couldn't just say young earth or old earth. You had to like do something else.
Well, I'm sorry, young earth.
Okay. So I guess I'm the only person here that would say old earth, but for me, my equivocation that I would say is it depends on how you look at it. And I'll get there in terms of what I think. But for you guys, I'm curious kind of how you came to that because Jake, you said something interesting before we started recording is that you used to be old earth, but now you are like staunchly young earth. So like how did you go through that, and did it just happen to be because you went and saw that big dumb boat in Kentucky or wherever that was?
Ken Ham got
Ken
it.
Ham
got him.
definitely, the Ark Museum and the Creation Museum, there was definitely a lot of, I was always old earth, and it just put so many pebbles in my shoes that I just feel like I couldn't walk in that anymore.
What were some of the bigger pebbles, I guess?
Okay, so first, one of the things was Adam brings death into the world. Okay, sin and death into the world. And so the idea that there were things that maybe animals that lived prior to the creation of man that would have died and become extinct would mean that Adam would not be bringing death into the world.
Agreed.
Second, there was also this idea that, okay, all of this vegetation supposedly exists because these animals were feeding on it. Yet, we know in Genesis 1 that God created light, and so the sun would literally have to have existed prior to when God actually created it. So that was another issue that I have. There's also some symbiotic relationships that you need for life that wouldn't have existed if, like, let's say that these days weren't actual days. So he creates plants, but we know that plants need pollen, and bees weren't created. So if these days were millions of years, literally these plants would not be able to pollinate. So there's three. I don't know. Okay. I could probably keep going, but those are three of the big ones.
Yeah, I mean, like recorded history doesn't even go back that far. I even just asked Wikipedia or Googled searched it, and it says the oldest recorded history goes back just about 6,000 years.
Correct.
The dinosaur soft tissues they found is very interesting to me. How could soft tissue last for millions upon millions of years?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's interesting to me, and some of the radiometric dating kind of issues, carbon-14 being found in these fossils that should have been gone at 60,000 years, which is about the limit for carbon-14. So,
Ryan, what about you?
Man, I just think it's a question or a thing that we get hung up on that we shouldn't. I like what Marcus Dodd says. It's not the object of the writers of Scripture to impart physical instruction or to enlarge the bounds of scientific knowledge. But if anyone wishes to know what connection the world has to God, it seeks to trace back all that now is to the very fountainhead of life if he desires to discover something unifying a principle or illuminating purpose. And so I never really got into young earth, old earth. I would say I'm young earth just because of what the Bible has to say. But I'm kind of like on one of those like weird things that you probably would disagree with, that when God created Adam, he didn't create Adam as a baby. He created Adam as a man. And so when he created the earth, what makes you think he didn't create the earth with some age and so on? So, I just think it's one of those mysteries that we'll never be able to understand. And I don't think it's something that we're meant to. God's going to have his way of doing things, and we're just his mere creation. So the fact that we think that we have the right to know or that we have the right answer, I think is just, what would the English say? Poppycock?
Poppycock. I think that was the first poppycock use on this podcast.
$5 word.
I will say this. There are some awful young earth arguments, and none of those were them. Because probably the worst young earth argument that I can think of off the top of my head is that God placed the fossils in the earth to test our faith. Yeah, I'm like, guys, really? So God gave us all these tools by which we can determine time, only to pull the rug out from underneath us at the end and be like, gotcha, it's actually only 6,000 years old. So that's part of the issue. I will say, for me, I'm about to read more than I've ever read on this podcast before. I was completely agnostic about this and had no interest in it until probably, I don't know, this was pre-Undaunted.Life. This would have been maybe 10 years ago. I read a book called Genesis and the Big Bang. It came out in 1991. Any of you guys read that? Genesis and the Big Bang? No. So and it's so weird that I can remember that the second chapter of this book blew my mind. So I'll tell you right from the beginning. I don't know that I'm smart enough to read this book, but I did. I read it and then I reread it. And so it's just kind of one of those things where you just read it and you're like, I don't understand. But I want to read a few sections here that kind of help undergird where I came to, because I feel like all of you gave a pretty good, albeit very short, understanding of why you feel like young earth, because some people are like, the Bible says it, so that's all there is to it. It's like, that's not all there is to it. And as we get into these first few chapters of Genesis, there are some things that need to be explained that can't be explained just by the text, because I think we can all agree that Genesis 1 doesn't give us an exhaustive detail of creation. It doesn't tell us everything, like which dinosaur was made first.
It's not a scientific book.
Right. So if you come to this as a scientific book, this isn't, a taxonomy book, this isn't a political science book, but I do want to read a couple of sections from chapter 2 of Genesis and the Big Bang. And so if y'all will indulge me as I read words that are beyond me.
I'm seeing the notes right now.
Oh, you can see them? So just zap me for every time. Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's only the bold. I'm only reading
the
stuff.
Bold? Okay, that's good. I was scared for a second.
The Bible gives God 6 days to form mankind from the material produced at the creation. Current cosmology claims, it even proves, interesting word use, that nature took some 15 billion years to accomplish the same thing. Isn't that funny? Because they've changed that to 24 billion since 1991. Anyway, back to the text. Which understanding is correct? Both are, literally, with no allegorical modifications of these two simultaneous yet different time periods. It is unequivocal 6 24-hour days elapsed between the beginning, that speck of time at the start of the Big Bang, and the appearance of mankind. And simultaneously, it took some 15 billion 365-day years to get from the beginning, or the Big Bang, as astrophysicists call it, to mankind. A little bit later in chapter 2. So the biblical calendar for the time after Adam presents no problem to archaeology. But what about pre-Adam biblical chronology? Can we integrate the biblical data with that presented by cosmology and paleontology for the period extending from the beginning to Adam? Yes, we can, but only if we practice an exercise in logic that we refer to as stretching time. This is the very heart of the matter. How are we to stretch 6 days to encompass 15 billion years? Or the reverse, how do we squeeze 15 billion years into 6 days? The suggestion is not as absurd as it may appear at first. In the Psalms of David, we read, 1,000 years in your eyes are as a day that passes. That's Psalm 90, verse 4. This presents the possibility that God's perception of time is quite different from mankind's. But the literal meaning of the verse is qualitative. It has the feel of time seeming to pass at different rates for different participants in an event, but not necessarily being different in reality. The verse in Psalms is reminiscent of the dilation of time dealt with in Einstein's revolutionary thought experiments. Einstein demonstrated that when a single event is viewed from 2 frames of reference, 1,000 or even 1 billion years in one can indeed pass for days in another. The basis we seek for matching the biblical and cosmological calendars is, in fact, partly found in relativity. But Einstein's theory is no longer a theory. It is an empirical, observed reality. Einstein's law of relativity tells us that dimensions in space and the passage of time are not absolute. They're measurements in an intimate function of the relationship between the observer and the observed. It seems incomprehensible that flow of time, which is so constant in our daily lives, can actually change, but it can. And this is the last section I'll read here. Hopefully this isn't putting anyone to sleep. Now, if there are only 6 days prior to Adam, how do we squeeze all the cycles of formation and destruction of worlds into the allotted time? The biblical commentators on whom we rely said explicitly that their first 6 days of Genesis were 6 24-hour days. This means that whoever was in charge recorded the passage of 24 hours per day. But who was there to measure the passage of time? Until Adam appeared on day 6, God alone was watching the clock. And that is the key. During the development of our universe and prior to the appearance of mankind, God had not yet established a close association with the earth. For the first 1 or 2 days of the 6 days of Genesis, the earth didn't even exist. Although Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," the very next verse says that the earth was void and unformed. The first verse of Genesis is a general statement, meaning that in the beginning, a primeval substance was created, and from this substance, the heavens and the earth would be made during the subsequent 6 days. This is explicitly stated later in Exodus 31:17, "For 6 days God made the heavens and the earth." From what were the heavens and the earth made during those 6 days? From the substance created in the beginning of those 6 days. Because there was no earth in the early universe and no possibility of an intimate tie or a blending of a reference frame, there was no common calendar between God and the earth. Relativity has taught us that there was not even a divine option of choosing a calendar that would eventually be compatible with all the various parts of the universe, or even with the more limited number of parts that eventually contributed to mankind. The law of relativity, one of the inherent traits of the universe established at its creation, makes it impossible for a common reference frame to have existed between the Creator and each part of the mix of matter that eventually became mankind on the earth on which we stand. According to Einstein's law of relativity, we now know it is impossible in an expanding universe to describe the elapsed time experience during a sequence of events occurring in one part of the universe in a way that will be equal to the elapsed time for those same events that are viewed from another part of the universe. The differences in motions and gravitational forces among the various galaxies, or even among the stars of a single galaxy, make the absolute passage of time, that's key, the absolute passage of time, a very local affair. Time differs from place to place. So I know I'm filibustering here just a little bit, but to just drive home kind of where I'm at. And again, I'm not gonna die on this hill. I'm open to everything that you guys have said. But John Lennox has also really formed my opinions on this. He has a book called 7 Days That Divide the World, and he's a very fair observer of everybody and all the different things that we look at here. And so he says that there are more than 3, but there are basically 3 main views of the Genesis days. There's the 24-hour view, which are the days are 7 24-hour days of one Earth week about 6,000 years ago. The day-age view, which is the days are in chronological order, each representing a period of time of unspecified length. And then the framework view, which is the days exhibit a logical rather than chronological order. So I want to read something from page 65 and 66 of that book. So I think that this is important, especially with the foundation I set with the previous passages I read. So this is from John Lennox, 7 Days That Divide the World, page 65. In the 3-part structure of Genesis 1:1 to 2:3 mentioned above, the initial creation act of Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 is separated from the 6 days of creation that follow it. You will find this structure followed, for instance, in the sectionalized scheme used in the English Standard Version, which we're all reading from. The separation between the first 2 parts is underlined by the fact that there is a change of past tenses between them in the original language. The verb created in Genesis 1:1 is in the perfect tense, and the normal use of the perfect at a very beginning of a periscope is to denote an event that took place before the storyline gets underway. Accordingly, there is a switch to the narrative tense beginning in verse 3. It is therefore linguistically plausible, though admittedly not so obvious, that the beginning of Genesis 1:1 was not necessarily intended to be understood as part of day 1, as frequently assumed. The initial creation could have taken place before day 1, but Genesis does not tell us how long before. nor does 1:1 to 1:2 tell us how long the creation of the heavens and the earth took. Indeed, the astrophysicists would indicate that the heavens existed a long time before the earth, which means that the question of the age of the earth and of the universe may be a separate question from the interpretation of the days, a point that is frequently overlooked. In other words, quite apart from any scientific considerations, the text of Genesis 1:1, in separating the beginning from day one, leaves the age of the universe indeterminate. Sad, therefore, that there has been so much fighting over the issue that has done nothing to commend the rationality and truth of Christianity to a world that isn't remotely interested in such details anyway. It should remind us of the principle that there is always a danger of understanding a text to say less than it does, as well as a danger of making it say more. He essentially made that point when he came on my show, because I got to ask him one question about young earth, old earth, and he didn't dismiss the question, and I have his quote here, but you guys can go back and listen to it. That's episode 365 with John Lennox, called Can Science Explain Everything? And so, again, I know that took quite some time, but again, for me, I get comfort from that. Comfort from knowing we can't possibly know that. If you read the rest of Genesis and the Big Bang, it's explaining how, like, if you shoot a laser against a piece of glass and it bounces off and it does this, and then you kind of do this formula between this space and that space, depending upon where you're looking at that experiment, you will get distance and time completely different. And so I'm completely okay with saying that if someone says the earth was created in 6 days, yes. Was the earth created in 24 something billion years? Also, yes. Like, everything was created, and I don't mean that as like a yes and all that. I'm like, oh yeah, everything's true and it's all relative. I don't mean that. It's that depending upon your perspective and knowing that we can't have God's perspective, I'm cool with either way. I'm not cool with people saying, you're not a Christian and you don't believe in the sufficiency of the Word of God if you don't believe the way that I believe. Yeah. So that took a while, but there you go.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I would actually, doing a Bible study over Ecclesiastes 7 right now, and I think one of the points that kind of came up in there is the earth is not some sort of predictable machine. Okay. I think a lot of times we have these scientific discoveries and we say, now we know how this works. And then, a century later they go, well, that actually isn't how it works. And it's changed, now here's what we know. And I think when you start thinking of the earth as not some sort of predictable machine where God just set it in motion and then stepped away, but you start thinking of it as a personally governed and complex space, I think that actually can kind of make you pause a little bit and start thinking of, okay, maybe some of these discoveries, the theory of relativity, never thought about it in that way, but I've always said that you can fit young earth or old earth into young earth just by the idea that God can create things with age in them. But at the same time, you can also, now with theory of relativity, is like, well, now I can fit young earth into old earth. I mean, there is that concept. So I think when you start looking at things and start going, maybe this is just a giant mystery we're not meant to know, and we're living just in a personally governed space, and just use the opportunity of scientific discovery as an opportunity to worship a pretty awesome God.
Well, the thing about we're not meant to know, I think that's the key, because that means you're bringing humility into a discussion, but also intellectual honesty that, no, this can't be proven. Mm-hmm. And because I've listened to hours and hours of debate on young earth, old earth, that's why I became so disinterested in it, because it's kind of the same thing with, Calvinism, Arminianism. You listen to these people debate for hours and then they come away more entrenched in what they felt beforehand. So you feel like maybe they didn't bring a whole lot of curiosity or intellectual honesty into the conversation. But I don't know anyone. So it seems like this, and y'all can correct me from your perspective. Old earth people look at young earth people like, oh God, you rubes. Like, you absolute morons. Like, look at all this stuff. But then
you don't have a college degree.
Right. But then young earth people look at old earth people like, oh my God, you're all pagans. You're all satanic. Like, and I'm just like, neither one of these is healthy. Like, neither one of these is good, because we can't know it. But I will say, from the young earth people, I feel like it's a little bit more annoying, because they will basically challenge old earth people and say, like, look, you don't believe in the sufficiency of Scripture if you don't believe that it's these literal words. And I'm like, well, where do we begin the literalness of reading the Bible and non-literalness? Like, is Jesus actually a vine? Is he a door that we need to knock on? Oh, well, no, that's allegory. I was like, well, but you're saying the same thing here, because if you hold the gap theory in any way, shape, or form, you say, hey, we don't know how long of a gap there was between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. People think that's anathema. I think it's crazy.
Yeah.
But
Go ahead,
I appreciate the Christopher Nolan rundown of old Earth.
What's
you
that?
just gave us? You ever seen Interstellar?
Well, yeah. Is that what
That's
they
what
said?
it kind of felt
Was that
like.
Anne Hathaway said in that movie?
No, it wasn't like Anne Hathaway, but it's like, you know what? We don't even know if there could be a stinking black hole like 6,000 years ago that was like messed with time and relativity and whatnot. Yeah. So like, I think it
so the Christopher Nolan comment was not a compliment, is what you're saying.
No, it wasn't.
It is. It actually is.
Dude, Christopher Nolan's the greatest director of all time.
Yeah. Until the last few. But did anybody watch Oppenheimer? It's like 3 hours. And
Oppenheimer was good. I liked it.
Okay, we don't have to get off on that.
There was a couple of scenes that didn't need to be in there.
Like 5. There were like 5 of them that didn't need to be in there.
But when I think about it, it's like, I think you're right. It's like, we can't just sit here and dwell on who's right and who's wrong. And I don't like it that when people say that, hey, if you're an old earther, you don't believe in scripture, it's just trying to like, we went on the Christopher Nolan side and I lost where I was thinking with this, but I think that's where I was getting at in the beginning. It's like, we don't know, and we don't sometimes deserve to know. And the fact is, I think we're so full of ourselves sometimes that we think we have the answer. Like, science is fallible, but Christ isn't. God isn't. God did this the way he wanted to do it, and you're never going to figure it out. And the fact that you keep trying and trying and trying, why? My answer is why.
Seems futile.
Christianity, I mean, look, Christianity isn't really about what you believe. It's about who you know.
Well, yeah, but like, that's what I was talking about with Dodds,
Yeah, we can disagree on the age of the earth. We can disagree on predestination. We can disagree on spiritual gifts, aliens. I mean, Bigfoot. I mean, there's all sorts of things that people are going to believe.
You believe in Bigfoot? You're not a Christian.
I'm just saying, Christians can hold a varying array of beliefs, but the more important thing is who you know. I mean, look, I believe every word in the Bible. I do. But there are a lot of Christ followers who don't have access to a Bible. Yeah. They don't have access to scripture, but they are still Christians. And I mean, heck, you could literally mark the first couple centuries of the faith. They did not have a Bible. They had scrolls and just testimony. That's it.
Catholic's fault.
This first chapter isn't about the scientific explanation of how God created the earth. This chapter is about the fact that you were created by God.
That's it.
And that's what it is.
And I think
the earth and everything was created by God. And you'll never figure it out.
Well, the point you're making for young earth people that are anti-science, that think like, no, we can't have any scientific explanation for anything. Guys, realize that science is God's gift to us to help us understand a modicum of what he did.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like that's an absolute gift to us to where we can look at these things. And that's why when people are like, oh, well, the dating's all off and this is all junk and you can't believe all that. It's like, man, slow your roll. You can barely pronounce the words in that textbook. So I don't know why you're dismissing an entire, field of study for that purpose. Browning, thoughts? Are you so disengaged with the young earth?
No,
you seem so disinterested with this.
No. I'm very, very interested. You guys have said a lot of good things. I was just thinking like you guys are going down a slightly different path, but I was just thinking like practically, like I've got a kid that's in high school. So what am I doing like to make sure that he's at least protected? His mind is protected from what he's being taught. I mean, the geologic column, which when you look at that, it's frustrating because it seems like it's still being taught and yet it has its own huge problems. It was created by two guys, one of which was an atheist that was his hell bent on getting rid of the whole Moses, whatever he called it, so he was trying to move away from Christians believing this whole young earth thing and whatever. It's just like, I think it's important that we understand what our kids are learning in school. Not that we have to get in huge debates about it and whatnot, but that there are problems that are still being taught, to our kids from a science-based perspective that there are huge holes in those arguments. So just like you're saying, Christians will make bad arguments about young earth. There's a lot of evolutionary guys that are making terrible arguments still that are in our textbooks today that just don't hold up in the grand scheme of things. So,
and that's why I think it's important. Again, like Eric, you and I have talked about this so much to where like if you put your kids in any school, regardless if it's public or private Christian or like if you just go to sleep at the wheel and you're not paying attention to the curriculum and you're not paying attention to the conversations, the things that your kids are being taught, you could potentially be setting yourself up and your kid up for a lot of pain. To get into the actual text here, I think the one thing that's important is the first 4 words, in the beginning, God. Like I literally drew a line and a line, like, let's just separate that. I feel like those first 4 words are more plausible than any argument I've heard from any strict materialist, like a strict materialist atheist. Because the thing is strict materialist atheists, like a Richard Dawkins or someone like that, they're like, miracles are ridiculous. It's like, okay, you believe in one miracle. You believe that time, space, and matter came into existence in a timeless, spaceless, immaterial way. So you believe in one miracle. And so my question to that person would be, why do you believe in one miracle, not several or multiple? And then to the Christian that's like, no, the Big Bang's not true. Don't you think this sounds pretty bangy? Like as you were reading it, like it sounds like a bang actually happened.
Banger. So this is interesting. So Sir Fred Hoyle was like the leading scientist on steady state universalism, which is essentially the universe has been here, it was always here, and forever will be here. That was his scientific theory. He was one of the biggest proponents of that scientific theory. And when the Big Bang Theory was introduced as a possibility for the creation of the universe, Sir Fred Hoyle literally said that it smacked of deism. When it came out, the idea was like, well, that just sounds like you're saying that God created the universe and it's just always been here. So it's interesting now that so many atheists point to the Big Bang as like the alternative to Genesis, when the scientists who were originally debating it were saying that was way more of an argument for God than what they were doing before.
Right.
I mean, it was straight up void. There was nothing. Yeah. It was not good. It's not like God took a bunch of things already created by somebody else or something else and formed the earth and formed the heavens and the earth. No, like he created the bangs to come together and create what it was. It's like thinking back at like us being created as man. Like we came from dirt. Like God created the dirt before he created us. So like he's always creating something that comes together that molds and brings something else together. And like that's what like I always hate the analogy of like, hey, the earth was just like this blank canvas, and God painted the earth. And it's like, no, God created the canvas. And then he created the thread to make the canvas, and then he created this and that. So you had a canvas. Like he created something out of nothing. And just think of the sheer like ingenuity and thought and everything when we go and look outside. Like when I'm outside sometimes when we're doing our trips for Sand and Stone, or I went to a cabin recently with my wife and I was just sat outside and I was like, look at this beauty. Like he created this. Like this came from his mind. My mind doesn't even think this way.
Yeah. Yeah, the basic questions that all my kids have come down to, or asked me is like, how did all this get here? And why does my teacher say that it came from a big bang? How can something come from nothing? I mean, it's a simple question. Nobody can answer that unless you come from a biblical standpoint.
Yep.
So.
And it's right there.
Wanted to go ahead and slam dunk that shout out. So sand2stone.us.
I said sand and stone.
That's okay. No, you kind of mumbled it, so nobody got it. But yeah, so if you're looking for it, guys, it's sand and the number 2stone.us, sand2stone.us. So that's one thing where Eric, the lovely Eric Browning over here from Forging Table fame, takes fathers and sons out into the wilderness, and there's all kinds of different rites of passage and different things like that. But one of the things you're doing is you're forcing, guys that are normally just slumming around, in, their office and their house and doing all these different things. You're getting them out into nature, putting them into slightly uncomfortable situations and scenarios and things like that. But when you think, I never think of myself too small unless I'm thinking about the gospel or in nature. Because when I'm walking to a deer stand in the middle of the night, I feel pretty darn small because I don't know what's out there and I hear a rustling. It's probably a squirrel, might be a Sasquatch with teeth. Like I have no idea and I'm terrified. Or when you're looking at a mountain or the Grand Canyon or some sort of like, the ocean. Gosh, whenever you're if you've ever been on a cruise and you have a cruise day where it's like the whole day you're just at sea and you're just looking out there in the ocean, you're like, there's nothing for me out there. Like if I were to fall off of this, there's nothing for me that is sustainable. Like this is not the earth that was created. And dude, I'm terrified by what's underneath it. Everybody's worried about stuff flying through the sky. I think the aliens are in the ocean, y'all. I was like, of anything, like this is what was the second movie that James Cameron made? Or not The Abyss, the blue people. Avatar. Like that's what's happening under there. But it's all evil, like demon, like dinosaurs that are still under there.
Sunk the Titanic.
Because guess what? The flood didn't kill them. The flood just gave them more room to play, y'all. They're still in there. I'm telling y'all. Nobody believes me?
I
You're not
believe you.
scared of the oceans?
I just had a thought about Titanic. That's all.
What's your thought? We got to go. Great movie.
If you think about it, Rose is at like 99 years old. And she doesn't think about her husband or her kids through life. She just thinks about some guy she met on a boat that she had a fling with. Like at her last moments in life. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's pretty sad.
It's been 84 years. You just ruined that movie for like everybody. Because yes,
if it's 2024 and you haven't seen Titanic,
bro, her heart will go on. How dare you? Like, what's wrong with you?
Jeez.
This film review has been brought to you by Ryan Horn.
I was like, that's the worst storyline ever.
You have no sense of the romantic. That's what you have.
I'm not a romantic.
You have a problem. Yeah,
my wife would disagree. I'm pretty romantic.
Shall we get Mrs. Horn on the show to see if we can get a confirm or deny? Well, hey, let's get back into the text here. The other interesting thing that I saw. So first of all, I just want to tee it up to you guys here in a second I know all of you found nuggets whenever studying Genesis 1, because before we get out here, I definitely wanted us to talk about the dominion mandate at the end where we get the Imago Dei and things like that. But just even like a little nugget, in the beginning, God, the word God there used, the Hebrew word is plural. So it's denoting his majesty, which kind of leads to at the end, because there's a lot of ink that's been spilled about. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image," and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like God's non-binary, has split personality disorder." It's like no, like he could be referring to Trinity, talking about himself, his Son, the Holy Spirit, God and Trinity. That's the plural of majesty. He could be talking to the heavenly host. He could be talking to the angels. But we'll get into the dominion mandate. But there's so many nuggets here in Genesis 1, so I'm just interested. Let's get into some nuggets.
Boom. God's first words.
His first word was boom?
No, it wasn't.
Okay. I just want to make sure I knew what you were saying.
This is like when I was like reading it, I was like, man, these were God's first words. Let there be light. And I just think back to John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, not even one thing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of mankind, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not grasp it. Like, it was void. It was dark. Like when we think about good and evil, and we'll go through the tree of good and evil, there's light and there's darkness. And luckily in the garden, we were, Adam and Eve were oblivious to the darkness because all they saw was the light. They saw God. And that was the first thing he created, was light and darkness. And so, he already created darkness, but then he created light so you could be out of the darkness. And so I just thought that was like a really amazing thing to look at.
I love how, and we'll get into it, I think, later on, how then God then allows Adam to co-create with him by naming the animals. So he uses his words to create, right?
Yep.
I think that's wonderful. And I think about James, of how, it talks about how our words can bring life and bring death, depending on how we use them. I think that's a great corollary if you jump forward to the New Testament. So, and just the whole idea, like when we'll go into caverns every once in a while and get in complete darkness and then just let everybody sit there and just let their eyes like search for something that they can't find. And then you just, the tiniest little light, you'll turn it on and it just illuminates everybody's eyes go directly to it. It can't help it. So anyways.
But when he creates light, he says it is good. Like that's the first thing that's good is light. Like the contrast between light and darkness. Yep. And so I think like when we look at the word that we're reading, like we're sitting here, we're reading the Bible and like, this is the light, this is his word and mandate. So
that's what I felt before. And we'll get into the Winkler nugget here in a second. But that whenever I was listening to it this morning, I was just kind of like, man, if more people actually considered this to be the word of God, I would say more people would read it, because there is a scriptural reading deficiency in modern Christendom. I forget what Barna or whatever group did the study, but they talked about some of the beliefs that Christians hold to, like that, Jesus isn't the only way to the Father. Right. And like there was just this laundry list as people are reading it. It's like, if you're an evangelical, you're just like, how could somebody come to these ideas? It's because they have a cultural understanding of Christianity and no understanding of biblical Christianity, right? And so it's like, when you're talking to someone about Christianity, I think it's appropriate to stop and be like, hey, can you describe what Christianity is real quick? Because I may not like that version either. Because I think Jay, who was sitting right there where Eric was when Jay was doing the stuff in Acts, he was like, hey, can you describe God? Because, you're an atheist, you're angry at this, God character. Can you describe what you think God is? Because I probably don't believe in that God either. So, let's make sure we're starting at the same place. So,
I mean, just to go off what you said, though, and we can get to Jake's thing, is that I think that's where we lose, this is why I want to get into Genesis, is we lose sight of God being the creator.
Well, that's one thing that we actually, I forgot to tee up at the very beginning is, why did we even decide to do this? Because we would typically round table and kind of figure out, do we want to get, and we had talked about Romans a little bit, but then Genesis just kind of emerged for us as gosh, at some point we got to go back to the beginning.
We got to start with the origins. I feel like we had to go back to the beginning. There's a lot of similarities in Genesis that happens throughout the Bible. Yeah. And so starting with Genesis is a great thing. But I think what we have to understand is I feel with cultural Christianity nowadays, I hear it a lot and there's truth in it. God is our Father. God is the Father of his children. His children are the ones who believe in him. But we have to remember that everybody, whether they believe or not, is still God's creation. God is a creator. Yeah. He created you. You are the mold. You are the clay, and he created you. And that's where we go back to Romans 2:12. Oh, wait, no. There was, I guess I didn't write it down. Oh, here it is. Isaiah 45:9. Woe to the one who quarrels with his maker, a piece of pottery among the other earthware pottery pieces. Will the clay say to the potter, what are you doing? Or the thing you are making say, he has no hands? And so I feel like we've come to that in cultural Christianity, that we're talking back to the potter, and we're not taking what the potter has to say to us. We're creating our own potter.
Yeah.
So
Kyle, going back to what you were mentioning earlier, why do you pick this book? Genesis is the foundation of Scripture. It's literally the foundation. It's got over 200 quotes or references to it in just the New Testament alone. Jesus referred to it on 11 different occasions. Every New Testament author refers back to Genesis in one way or another. If you think about it, if Genesis isn't true, then Jesus is essentially lying. And because it is the foundational scripture, the rest of the Bible would collapse without the truth of Genesis. So, I think I kind of look at it, Matthew 7:24-7, wise man builds his foundation on solid rock. Genesis is the solid rock of scripture. It's all built on that.
That's great.
That's
awesome.
So, here, if we have more nuggets, if we have time, we'll get into it. But I definitely want to make sure we get into the dominion mandate, because obviously I'm just obsessed with the word dominion, kind of the dominion mandate. So when you go back to verse 26, God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And we got creeping things coming in the scripture for sure. So God created man in his own image. That's the Imago Dei. So if you hear people say Imago Dei, that's IMAGO space DEI. Ooh, DEI. Imago Dei, Imago Dei. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And so we are in this political moment where even saying something like that is so unbelievably, it's just seen as so scandalous and things like that. But guys, even strict atheists will talk about how sexual dimorphism in animals is older than old. It's older than anything. If there is not sexual dimorphism, the separation of male and female, then there is nothing else, right? Because we can't have a propagation of a single species without sexual dimorphism. And so that's how we get back to that. But to go back to dominion, we see the dominion mandate elucidated more in verse 28. And God blessed them, and God said to them, here are your mandates. 1, be fruitful. 2, multiply. 3, fill the earth. 4, subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And so for us guys, that's why that might be, even as I'm just kind of, verbally processing it right now, because I get asked when I go on other podcasts or stuff like that, why are you so obsessed with men's ministry and getting, even though I don't use that phraseology anymore because it's so jacked with all these wrong ideas, why are you so interested in men leveling up and getting better and being better husbands, being better fathers, and being all these different things? I think it's because I can't stand it when people aren't doing the things that they're supposed to do, when guys aren't living up to their potential. I remember, because again, I'm verbally intelligent, but I'm not intelligent. I'm not 35 on my ACT type intelligence. And so like I can kind of trick people, but when you see people that have like some serious mental horsepower and they just suck as humans, like they'd rather play Dungeons and Dragons and, watch porn and jerk off and eat Doritos. And like, this is just like these people, they're just wasting. And because again, I was 5'10", 170 pounds trying to play, 6A baseball and things like that. And it's like, all right, there's no more growing. That's happening here. And then you see the kid that's 6'3", that looks like he was cut out of a piece of granite, and he just doesn't really want to try hard because he's never really had to. And you just like, give me my drive with that, genetics, and like my life would be so different. But again, God has different plans for everybody and things like that. That's part of the thing here is I feel like so many people are ignoring their dominion mandate on a macro level and certainly on a micro level that it leads to kind of where we're at right now, where everything's a mess. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, I've never thought of it that way, but really what you're talking about here is like accountability. Dominion is nothing more than like you're accountable. God is giving us stewardship over the resources of the earth here, and we're accountable to those things. But at the same time, there's so many things. I got to, so often I actually keep saying, like, I feel like people are allergic to accountability now. It's every time,
every setting.
And so, going back to the point of like the person who's been given these great gifts, and it's like, well, if I just could put my drive in them, then my gosh, like how great would they be? And it's like, you've been given this. What are you doing with it? God's given you dominion over this gift in and of itself, and you've just decided to spoil it. And I see it all the time.
Well, yeah, as a manager, when you're trying to get people to do, because you end up wanting it more than they do. I think I've told this story before, but I had a guy, he came to our Fight Club thing on Sunday night, and I could see it written all over his dumb face when he was walking up to me after just getting, pounded on and just like dying during the entire workout. And he walks up and he goes, "Hey, Kyle," and I go, "No." And he goes, "What?" I go, "No." He's like, "Well, I didn't even say anything." I was like, "You were coming up to me to ask me to help you get in shape, weren't you?" He's like, "Well, yeah." I'm like, "Not interested. No, thank you." And he was very taken aback by that. And, then I just I said, "Dude, you have a supercomputer in your pocket. Like you've got all these things at your disposal. You make a good living. Go figure it out for 6 months. Go figure it out. Go find a workout thing, go hire a trainer, join a new gym, set up a home gym, do something like that. Like, come back in 6 months, then I'll help you. Like, I'll help you sharpen the sword. I'm not going to help you find it." Like that. Like, that's the big difference I told this guy, because I've wanted it more than other people have wanted it throughout my entire life. And guys would want to get in shape. They'd come to me as like I was going to be their savior. I was going to make the plan for them. I was going to help them figure out the modalities. I was going to help them figure out their injuries and all those types of things. And I gave so much effort to these people, and they gave basically a little bit of effort at the beginning, and then it died off after like a week or two. And I'm like, I don't have time for that. And I don't have like the emotional bandwidth to like be disappointed by people like that anymore. And the same thing goes with all other things. You want something for your sons and it doesn't quite work out. You want something for people in a sales scenario and it doesn't quite work out because you want it more than they do. You've got an underling that's working for you that you're just like, if you gave 50% of your brain to this process, like you would do yourself and this company so well. And I'm just like, I'm over like wanting it for someone else. Yeah. I will help you if you want it. But if you don't want it, I ain't going to try to make you want it.
I get it, Kyle. I'm going to try and do the 10 pull-ups. I promise you.
That's not what I was saying. That's not what I was getting around to. It's not what I was getting around to. But, I do require 10 pull-ups for everyone that's in my presence for more than an hour.
So that's not going to happen.
I think people get beaten down by performance expectations. I think this is part of the problem in life is that people expect people to perform for them. And we live in a society, in a world where we can't we're not going to make everybody happy. There's always going to be, okay, you did this, but now you got to do this, or you did this okay, but you could do better. So I do think people get beaten down by this expectation for performance. I think the perspective is that, and here it is in Genesis 1, is that we don't work for or do things for ourselves or for other people. We do it strictly for God. And so when we talk about stewardship, we are being good stewards of what God has given us, not so that we can get approval from man, but that we can get approval from God, or at least be satisfied in working out what he's given us. So like, it's simple things like we have certain minimal expectations for grades, but I tell my kids, I was like, I don't want you to go get A's and B's for me. Don't do it for mom, and really don't do it for yourself. Do it because God gave you a brain to have wonder of what he's put in this earth for you to discover, or what has been discovered is now being passed on. Have a wonder in that, and seek him through school. Be a good steward of what we give him through sports, whatnot. I was just thinking as we were sitting back here, like, well, I hope someday that I have the opportunity to sit in a heavenly theater and get to see God recreate. Man, I just want to see how that went down. Yep. Gosh, that just brings so much joy. Just thinking that I might get to do that someday.
Well, and I want to see the epic movie of my life, of the stuff that I couldn't see.
Yeah.
So those times when I was so pissed off that I couldn't find my phone, and here I am going through the house, destroying it, trying to find my phone. And I've used this example before. But if I had my phone in my pocket and I got in my truck, I would have been at that intersection where that 18-wheeler didn't see the red light and went right through it. And then I would be worm food. Right. Mm-hmm. I've seen so many of those things. I told you all the story about Forging Tabler. Matt Grassmeyer and I were doing some work together in college, at this elementary school, and we're driving back to school. And if I'm in the front of the line at the intersection, I hate when people aren't paying attention at the front of the line because it jacks the rest of the line up. So I'm always super dutiful. For whatever reason, I wasn't dutifully paying attention to the light. Light turns green. The light's green for probably 2 or 3 seconds before I even realize it. And then a truck comes careening through the intersection. Had I been paying attention, it would have hit me right on my driver's side door. Who the heck knows what life looks like from there? Like we can't really know that. So I want to be in that grand, globe, whatever that thing is, in Las Vegas, that big theater thing, the sphere or whatever. Yeah. Like I want to watch the movie of my life, because I guess we're not going to be sleeping or resting in heaven. I don't really know. But like where it's like, hey, look, you little idiot. This is all the things I did for you this entire time. That's how God talks to me. I don't know how he talks to you guys, but look, you little moron. Like you were mad and I was helping you out. Like here you go. So I think that'd be awesome.
That doesn't sound like a loving father.
That's how I accept love. I accept love by completely tearing myself down. Don't you know this? You know about my internal dialogue. You've seen a little bit of it.
Yeah, I have.
It's ratchet. What? Go ahead.
But Dominion, the one thing that I looked at it on Dominion and this whole thing is like, that's what separates the man from the beasts. We're made in God's image. So what that does is we have a conscious spirit. And so that's the image that we're created. Like God is a spirit. He doesn't have arms, legs. He's a conscious spirit. And so we are given a conscious spirit because we're made in his image. That's why, we need Christ, in that in the end, we have a spiritual death because of Adam's fall. But then we have to look at, and Kyle, you're not going to like this, but all beasts don't have conscious spirits. So
why would I not like that? I agree with that 100%.
Because that comes back to your buddy not being in heaven with you.
Oh, you can eat crap, Ryan.
My golden retriever is going to be with me in heaven. Come on,
Roman the giant is going to be in heaven.
Spirits,
he's going to be in heaven.
Will there be a giant schnauzer in heaven? Absolutely.
Yeah, you know why? Because he's on my leg, Ryan. Look at that.
We just got Kyle to pull down his pants. There. I knew I could do it.
Right there.
You owe me $5, Jake.
You're welcome, YouTube. He will be in heaven. Screw you guys if you don't believe it.
But no, but the thing is that's what separates us. That's why you had dominion over Roman the giant. That's why he loved you, and like you were his right hand or left hand guy, but like the thing is like we have conscious spirits. That's what separates us from the beast. That's why we have dominion over them, is because they do not have conscious spirits.
Well, and that's why our suffering is wholly different. I've heard, I wish I could remember who said this, because it's like completely shifted my brain about like, because I love Nature is Metal on Instagram. It's literally just animals eating other animals. But like you hear these animals go, rah, they're going crazy as they're being eaten alive. But someone was like, look, since angels are not sentient conscious beings, they don't know that they are being eaten alive because they have no concept of themselves.
Yeah.
There is no they. They're not like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. What am I going to do? Who's going to take care of my kids? Like, they're just being eaten. They're literally dancing to their DNA. And like, that's where you hear other people talk about awe. Like you never see animals just looking up at the heavens, like wondering about their place in the world. If they're looking up at the heavens, it's because they're looking for predators or they're looking for prey. Like that's literally it.
Yeah.
But we understand suffering and we understand the suffering of others, which means when we cause others to suffer, it's a special level of cruelty because it's not cruel for a lion to eat a baby zebra. A lion's just doing lion stuff.
But that's the thing. That's where it comes back to what you guys were talking about, is that we have dominion over these things and we have stewardship, and how we stewardship not only our animals and the way we do our life, but also how we treat other people, other people in the Imago Dei. And so I just thought it was pretty interesting when I looked at dominion. I was like, man, we have dominion over this earth, but the reason we have dominion is because we are made in his image and we have conscious spirits that they do not have.
Hey, remember that one time on the forging table when you forced me to pull my pants down to show everyone my Roman tattoo on my white thigh? Do you remember that?
I was like, I wonder if there's a way I get him to pull down his pants.
I really wish I had like an underwear sponsor, because that would have been a perfect time to pull like double duty.
Sacks.
Hey, Sacks, guys. I mean, hey, if you're listening to this right now, like I only wear your stuff, so it's awesome. But guys, as we wrap up our discussion on Genesis 1, and there's so much that we left out because it's just a matter of doing this, but we're going to be covering this entire first section. At the very end, there's something interesting about the very last verse. And God saw everything that he had made, which included the cosmos, right? And behold, it was very good, and there was evening and there was morning on the sixth day. He created us. He created humanity on the sixth day. And this dude created the cosmos. He created the constellations. He created all the animals. He created all these things that we look at and wonder and we're in awe of. But the only thing described as very good in Genesis 1 in the creation story is us. That's the only thing described as very good. So parting thoughts on Genesis 1.
Well, just interesting on that last verse. In the new creation in Revelation, it doesn't seem like there's going to be night and day. So when he created all of this, seems like there's night and day there. I don't know. It never dawned on me that apparently someday there won't be night and day. But in the beginning, when it was perfect, there was night and day. Yeah. Anyways,
good little nugget.
I would say that earlier we kind of said this isn't a scientific text, and it's not. But science is in here if you're looking for it. Science is expresses the universe in 5 different terms: time, space, matter, power, and motion. And in Genesis 1 and 2, you literally have all of those things. You have in the beginning, which is time. You have God created, which is power. You have the heavens, space. You have and the earth, matter. And the Spirit of God hovered over to the waters. That is motion. So it's there. There was actually something else which I just found fascinating, but there's science all over the Bible. One of the things that was so interesting was Leviticus. In 12:3, the circumcision of infants is supposed to take place on the 8th day, which just so happens that a baby's peak of blood clotting is on the 8th day, and then it falls after that. So there's so many things that God kind of laid out there for us that we had not discovered, but in time we actually came to a discovery. I've got like 8 other examples in here, but
as you're saying that, I discovered that you are the largest man using the smallest tablet I think I've ever seen. This is like
we should switch.
It just occurred to me that is super funny as you're using your giant fat finger to just like and this little bitty thing. Don't be mean to this thing. Take it easy.
That's
Ryan.
actually my cell phone.
Okay.
So to go off what Jake said about science and everything, I think sometimes when I read this is that we have a deep view of ourselves, and that we know what's right and we know what's correct, and that we have, science and everything. And I feel like some scientists, not all scientists, are trying to disprove Genesis. And I think we have to remember that, some of those people have a deep view of themselves and we have a shallow view of God. And so I think that we need to hold on to a deeper view of God and a shallow view of ourselves when we read Genesis, and know that he's the creator and he created us. And there's things that we're not going to understand, but his word's here, and what he wants us to get out of his word is a relationship with him and who he is and why he sent his son and why he created us, rather than trying to figure out how old the earth is.
Well, guys, we somehow did it. That's Genesis 1, but we're going to have to leave it there for next week, guys. Make sure you are read through the end of Genesis 2, because we're covering Genesis 2 next week. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost at Undaunted.Life. Our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. So we get asked about the Logos Bible software. It is where, Ryan?
In the show notes.
In the show notes. But it's also in the show notes. Breaking news. We have a Forging Table starter set through Crossway. There are 5 books there. the number of emails and DMs I get about, I went to the Crossway website, I can't find the Forging Table Starter Set, blah, blah, blah. Every time I've talked about the Forging Table Starter Set, I've said it's where, Ryan?
In the show notes,
It's in the
guys.
show notes. So guys, if you want to get this 5-book set that has an amazing Bible, it's got a commentary in there, it's got a study journal, it's got some devotionals, it's got some great stuff in there. If you go to the show notes, and if you go in there, you can see all those books, and then you can put them together in a cart and a package, and guess what? You can get them for 50% off because we love you guys. But we're going to stop loving you if you keep asking me where to get it, because where you get it is
the show notes,
and
guys.
that's where we're going to go from now on. And guys, I also want to remind you that we are a donation-based ministry. So if you want to see more things like the Forging Table in the future, and if you want to see things like the Forging Table continue, you can hop on board and become a monthly donor. That link is also
in the show notes.
In the show notes, it is Undaunted.Life/donate. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.